Given that usually Carsten shows up for these meetings, I'd wait a few more minutes until we start, until he's here, and until then possibly others join in too. By the way, Marco, as we're waiting, sorry for not getting back to you earlier about the other document synchronization. Right now I can't tell what I'll manage to stuff into the remainder of this week.
No worries. Thanks.
As for whether Meet Echo captures the names, I don't know that for sure yet. So I'd rather stay on the safe side and keep the attendance in the minutes. But I'd take an action item to check whether that is done, because probably is, so that we can do away with a bit more of the repetitive tasks. And also, while we're waiting, could I ask for someone to volunteer helping out with the notes?
I can help out.
Thank you very much. Okay then, to not delay things needlessly, I'd suggest we get started. So welcome everyone to this interim meeting of the CBOR working group. You're all familiar with how this works, so I won't go into details, especially given that everyone has so far signed up for the attendance sheets. We have a short agenda for today that is going through documents that have changed, or that, documents that have changed or have received promises to report something about them. On network addresses, we have network addresses with a few new changes in there. File magic with pending changes with respect to implementer advice. and someone, as it looks like right now, probably me, will report from the Coral implementer team to talk about how we are planning to use CBOR Pact there. We do have a kind of inactive agenda item on the map-like data structures. Emil has mentioned that he's not fully done with the comparison yet, so this is still going on, but won't receive any updates today unless someone else has news. Any topics you'd like to add? Anything you'd like to point out right here? Then let's get started with network addresses. This has two new additions since the last meeting. One being that there is now CDDL in place that helps especially writers of other specifications to include a network address. And there's also an addition about addresses with prefix, the thing we've talked about a lot in the context of describing a subnet, but it might be useful to have an address in there too. There is now an explicit facility for that in there. Michael or Carsten, just in case you, because you added, if I remember correctly, the address with prefix. Do you want to say a thing about that?
Well, I just dialed in, so I have no idea what you have said, but yeah, essentially we had that discussion. It's not a slam dunk because it does increase the complexity of this draft. On the other hand, it's something that I've actually used a lot in configuration files, so I expect it will be useful. So I think it's a net win.
Yeah, so I just shared the two things. So this is the CDDL addition to the draft, and this is one of the two parts of the adding the thing. Carsten, I know what you mean by this sentence here, down here, but I'm wondering whether it's completely understandable to people whose English is less good.
Yeah, that can certainly be improved.
Yeah, so I think, I know what you're trying to say. I just might change the words there.
Can you put a note on there so I don't forget to update my PR?
I already merged your PR. I already merged
it. I might still update it.
Okay. Okay, I guess I can do that.
Thanks.
Okay, and that's really about it, about that document. And then he added we now have three forks in this rather than two. There we go, 3 forks rather than 2. And that's it. And I would like the working group's blessing to add Carsten as an author.
That sounds like a reasonable thing to do, given the change.
Okay. Do you want me to go on to file magic, or do you want me to come back?
Any questions from the groups, comments, or opinions? Hearing none, yes, please go on.
Okay, so I added this pull request on advice. And aside from this question from Carsten about what is an empty sequence, I haven't had any other feedback. I haven't merged it. And so I think it's warrants some discussion about this. My text is probably inadequate in the end. And that's it, right? So basically I'm saying that you should, if you are if you normally would be processing many objects in a file, then it's probably appropriate to put a CBOR sequence in. Otherwise, the CBOR tag is probably less invasive because it doesn't necessarily require any changes to any other users of the file. On the other hand, if you are the first creator of the file and the user of the file, then it may be quite arbitrary as to what you create.
How about the to be honest, I'm not fully sure if the addition of if the registration for the tags for the content formats are in there. And I know that I should probably, given that I requested this, I should probably review this pull request within this week.
So that's not in this.
Okay.
This is a pull request. I merged that as uncontroversial.
Yep. But as for the advice, is there a situation in which someone would go for? So when would one go for the content format annotated version rather than registering a tag? Is this purely something that one would do when receiving data over the network in a content formatted way and wanting to preserve that information on disk, or is this something that under any circumstances someone would do in their own file format because they are registering a tag for it anyway?
I would say that you asked two questions and I don't think either of them are addressed actually. The first thing you asked is, would you translate content format or MIME types that you received over the net to a tag to put onto the file, or vice versa? Would you create content format as a server based upon tags that you find in the file? I would say that's entirely appropriate, but would be specific, to CoAP or HTTP, and would be completely inappropriate for, I don't know, SMTP, right? So that really belongs in, I think, in the document about that protocol. We could make some suggestions about CoAP or PAT, since CoAP's already published and HTTP's already published. We can make some suggestions. But the specific thing that I understood from the content format was that for all of the things that we have a content format, we essentially already have a tag allocated. And so you don't need to go find you don't need to register a new tag. And that's all the point was, is that you don't need to go register a new tag, because if there's a MIME type, there's probably a content format, and therefore there's a tag number. So I don't think that part, the last part, answers your first question, which is should you translate to and from the network protocol? I think I can't answer that question. I think it's a good idea, but I don't know that we should say it here.
Yeah, I think generally having common or preferred or pre-existing or whatever way of getting a tag is better than exercising the race condition where people are registering tags for the same thing with different numbers, and then we have to clean up after that. And so I think the advice here should go into using these tags when they are available. But yeah, I agree. If you are doing something with SMTP or so, that's maybe not the most obvious thing to do.
What do you mean by these tags? The
content format tags.
Okay.
So what all is said in this is that if there's a CoAP content format number, section blah blah blah, there and that, then you don't need to allocate a new number. That's all that really I think was the point of we said so far. We didn't say anything about whether you should translate back and forth on or off disk, right? So if you think that we should say that, then that would be, to me, a different discussion, because it has nothing to do with, obviously it's hard to translate to and from content format if there isn't a content format. But you know, if you did do a new thing and you got a COAP a CBOR tag and you got a MIME type and a content format, then you're all set with all of those things if you wanted to translate back and forth.
Yeah, I think that the one thing that could be added is that if there is a media type, but no content format, and that appears to be a bit of a chance occurrence, then it's maybe better to register a content format than to register a new tag that can just be used in the file magic.
Yeah. Okay. So we could say something right here about that, maybe.
So we still have this old experiment that we never completed into a proposal where all media types get a content format number, which is easy because there aren't that many media types. And that's really something that at some point we need to do. That doesn't help with weird parameters, but it helps with the basic problem that just about any media type out there will have a content format number then. So there's even a range reserved in the content format number space, the 1,000 to 10,000 range for this. But that's something the core working group has to do and not the CBOR working group. So my main question is whether we carry the content format number registration thing as a separate document or whether we merge the two documents because I mean, we don't want to kill the ISG by 1,000 little documents.
I suspect that we might not even need a document, that the ISG just has to tell IANA to make it so.
Well, but we probably do.
Yeah.
Because the way this range, well, you're right. Somebody could just sit there and watch the content format number registry and register the other things. But yeah, I think it would be better if this were simply automatic and not relying on an external entity we actually don't have a control over as IETF.
So would you say that we are writing a document that is updating the MIME registration template to say you will always add a content format? Or are we is it that we're retroactively adding ones that don't have one, or both?
So the current text says we are making a single registration in the tags registry that essentially points to the content format registry. And I'd like to get this through the ISG before IANA tells us that this cannot be done. So there would be an automatism by registering a content format. You get a CBOR tag. How do you say that? You pay only once and you get two things. Yeah, and if you look at the CT tags document, it's really short, so it should not be a big thing to merge this into this one.
I think that one more upside of merging them is to make sure that those are not seen as competing things, but kind of both have their place, and then the document can talk about when to use either.
I guess I want to know if this is a new document or if this is something that's being proposed to be added to this document.
Yes, and I just said I propose adding this to this document.
Okay.
The text is already there, so I just have to
No,
convert the text into a pull request.
Oh, okay. So, all right. I think it muddies the water for this document because I think it muddies what is a simple BCP, which actually doesn't have, and it is a BCP, I think, with what is in fact a revision to an IANA process, which I think needs to be a document of a, maybe it's also a BCP, but I think it needs to be documented in a different stream almost. Barry?
Different stream doesn't, that puzzles me. We certainly have precedent for putting IANA stuff in BCPs. There's no reason it shouldn't be. Yeah, I'm sort of mixed on this.
I mean, it needs to get a different kind of review is what I really mean. I know that you know, most of our process documents actually are BCPs, but because they're not standards track. But I'm saying that they're kind of a BCP in a different sense, in that this document is just, here's a good way to do something, right? And it doesn't really establish a standard necessarily. And then the other side is, when you're doing this process, these are some new rules to follow.
But there are no new rules. There is just a new side effect.
Well, okay. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, I suppose that the trigger, the pointer would be that if this formally updates the document that created the registry, then I think that's enough of a pointer to make it work. And yeah, I mean, BCPs get the same review as standards track documents, so I'm not concerned about the level of review. If we think that people might miss this bit because they're just breezing through it, we could always highlight that in the last call. And certainly the introduction introduction and abstract would both say that this was happening in the document. So I'm not worried about that. So I'll leave it up to it's up to the working group whether you want to split it out or not. But I don't see any particular reason to.
So can you quickly bring up the document? Probably would take me a minute to actually share that. You give Michael the screen.
I don't have the screen. Here we go. It takes so long. So what do I want to do? Probably go here.
Go to data tracker and
Still needed. I'm not sure what still needed means. Here. What is it you want me to show you in the whole document?
not in this document. Can you show the document that says something about tags and content formats? You're referencing it, so it's being referenced on that page.
This one? No.
No. Let me find out how I call
A bit further down, it's not adopted, so.
It's not adopted, right? Notable tags, content format. There we go.
Tag
Yes.
content form.
No, that's not the one I want. I want that one.
If you look at the IANA considerations of this document, the rest is really just explanatory stuff. If you look at the IANA considerations, it doesn't look like it's changing the world.
It's just a comparably large registration.
Yes.
So I guess I was interpreting this a little bit different. That was beyond this point, which was that whenever someone did a media type application, a MIME type, that they would always ask for content format as well, and they would get one in this. They would get a content format from COAP, and therefore they would get a tag from this range as well. But the point was that they would always ask for a content format when they did a MIME type registration, and therefore we're updating the MIME type template. That's what I understood you to be saying.
No, that is still a plan, but that's work in core, and there's a different draft that's not supposed to be mentioned here.
Yeah, so the only thing that leaves of what you just described, Michael, is a mild recommendation that registering a content format may be an easy way to get a well-defined tag for a media type. But that's really, I mean, this is not even recommended. That's just a reminder that this is a way to do that.
And okay, it seems to me like this document here should go into the core document about MIME types, but I don't know what document.
No, it's a CBOR thing. It doesn't have anything to do with core.
Okay. I guess
it tells you how you get tags for that CBOR.
I guess you're yeah. So all I'm saying is that my understanding is that this document here is trying to say whenever you ask for a MIME type, you get a content type, a content format, right?
No, that's actually not what this document says.
Okay.
There's another document which is long expired that addresses that part.
Okay, so all I'm saying is that it seems like it just should all go together. That's all, in a single process thought. That's all.
What is this?
The connection between media types, content types, and yes, content formats, and therefore, if you want CBOR tags, that just all sounds like the same registration action. When someone has something new, it just says get all these things and just do it.
Yeah, but none of the tag part is really dependent on this. It would
fair enough. I agree with you. I agree with you. I'm just trying to say that they're not dependent on each other, but it seems like it's a single coherent thought. That's all to me. I don't want to take forever on this. I'm sorry. I'm not really. I don't really care one way or the other. All I'm saying is that it seems like it's a single coherent thought, and that by spreading it around, we're making it in different documents. We're just making it harder for people to know what's going on. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, but again, none of this is needed to get the tag. We could put these 3 lines of IANA considerations and optionally the explanatory text into the IANA considerations and an appendix of the FileMagick document, and we would be done with the whole issue.
Carsten, could you could you maybe suggest then text that would be added to the pull request that Michael showed earlier about when to use what? That
yes, that's a good idea.
When to use this?
Yep, makes sense.
Please, thank you.
I hope I can do this before the deadline, but I think so.
I don't have any great objection to putting this into this content in. I'm just saying that it seems that it's moving further from being a simple document to being a lot of other things. That's all. So whatever.
So, okay, sorry, I had to step out for a minute, and I'm back. I think I caught up on in the notes. So I guess can we see what it looks like when the text is merged in, and then decide whether we think that's reasonable or it complicates the document too much? So does that make sense?
I do a pull request that adds the IANA considerations and the explanatory text that we have to the FileMagick document. And then we can discuss this pull request. And I do a separate pull request on what needs to be added to the advice section.
Okay, makes sense. Makes sense to me. Does it make sense to you, Michael? Michael?
Yes, it makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, so I mean, we can always go back if we put it if we try this and it doesn't look right. So.
Okay, I think that's all we can say about FileMagick today. So about CBOR Pact, we've had a meeting, Coral Design Team meeting last week. Carsten, do you want to say something there, or shall I? I've taken a few notes that what I say, but if you want to do this, please go ahead. Otherwise,
no, please go ahead.
Okay, so taking off my chair hat and switching to the role of someone presenting from other working groups using this. To briefly summarize, Coral, the format for describing web links in a constraint usable way, has long since had ways of something dictionary-like to compactly represent relation types that would otherwise be text and or URIs, and can now be brief integers. With CBOR Pact on the horizon and Coral now being in an active phase of development again, we've looked into CBOR Pact, and the current plan is for Coral to use CBOR Pact with all its semantics and the mechanisms like defining dictionaries and defining tags, with the limitations that we will need to profile it to some extent, because this is meant. CBOR Pact Coral is meant to be read ideally single pass by very constrained devices to look for particular links in a document that they receive, or to understand and populate forms. And this will need limitations with respect to where can a compression tag be used and where not, and can prefix compression be used and in which formats and all those things. Right now, we are moving from those old numeric identifiers towards Pact CBOR without any constraints applied, but we will look into the Coral documents that we get out of it and the mechanisms we use to later decide how can we limit this to make sure that every document can be understood by a constrained parser. One thing where we'll certainly do a bit of experimentation that might be useful for CBOR Pact in more general is where to get the dictionaries from, because we have like all the three major cases in Coral, or at least we're considering all the major cases, that being it is known from the context, for example, because we're using a specific particular content format that just has these pre-set up. There could be something like an import function, whether it's from a URI or from a hash identified or otherwise generally known dictionary, and there could be locally defined dictionary entities that are set up at the start of the file. whatever we'll find, we'll keep you in the loop on what's useful and not. But first, there will be a bit of experimentation. One point that causes us still to have a bit of trouble with CBOR Pact is that it can be viewed from two perspectives. It can be viewed as a kind of purely syntactic thing that is fully resolved and expanded before the application ever gets to see the quote actual CBOR behind it. And it can be viewed as an application visible semantic annotation, where the application really does get the tag and then might have the possibility to look into that tag or decide to not follow this in all its expansion, but just process it as some compression point. This distinction is particularly relevant when there are different sources of dictionaries, and this can lead could lead to explosion attacks. Like kind of we've had this in XML, and there's zip bombs and all those things. With compression, it's often very easy to set up something that will, when unpacked, looks like terabytes of data. And depending on which view one takes, we may need a few precautionary measures or not. Because if it's purely a syntactic thing, then the parser is supposed to know about this, and whatever its own limitations would apply. Sorry, the Coral processor would know that at this point there could be a tag, and that could lead to some recursion that needs to be limited. Whereas if there is, if this is really a syntax thing, and the application would see this in its unpacked form, then we'd need to think more carefully about how we can limit this down. As I understand, there are no kind of we don't have concrete results there, but just want to disseminate that this is a topic that might need discussion also in CBOR Pact. Yep. So that's the state of things around Coral.
So the one thing that's a bit different between compression and CBOR Pact is that you don't really need to do a separate decompression step from the step of actually using your data. So in particular, if you do some profiling and remove some of the more icky to implement aspects of it. So I don't really see this alternative either expanded during parsing or handled at the application level. So between them, there is something where the parser generates a DOM-like structure that actually contains references. So it would be the DOM access functions that actually look inside and see, oh, is this real data or is it a reference to something else? And that would enable the application to actually maybe use a variant of the DOM access function that exposes whether you have a reference or an actual value. So this would allow to actually maintain some semantic significance of using the Pact mechanisms. Semantic significance in the sense not that it really changes everything, but that it just allows more efficient processing by the application.
So so basically that would be like an LSTAT if you're coming from POSIX file systems.
A what?
An LSTAT. So give me the information about that file. Usually follows
very much exactly that. Yes, that was of course the thing I had in mind when I started thinking about this.
Yep, sounds good to me.
I think most software developers understand symbolic links, so this is actually a good way to explain what's going on in a CBOR-PACT decoder.
So like people are usually not afraid of things that contain symlinks. They can just use it the same way, and just don't expect that something like a dereferencing copy. Yeah, obviously that can explode, but regular use will not.
Yeah, and we already have the problem that CBOR-PACT can have cyclic structure. So Michael made a proposal to make that impossible, but I think the result of discussing that was that this restricts the forms of compression you can actually get from packing more than we may want to. So anything that actually follows these links needs to have some artificial limit, like symbolic links have an artificial limit when you run into a cycle, which might not actually be a cycle, but just too many references needed to get at things. So that's even something that symbolic links users are aware of, at least if they have used this function in earnest. They certainly have run into situations where you had more than, what's the limit, 40 dereferencing actions.
Yeah. So quite possibly this could wind up in implementation guidance for CBOR-PACT.
Absolutely. So Windows 7 has it at 31. Do people remember what various Linuxes are using? On Linux, it's 40, so I seem to remember that correctly. Yeah, so the assumption would be that we can come up with a rule of thumb or you probably need much less than 40 steps in most of our applications, but we could still come up with a relatively high number like 40 and say any implementation should keep a count, and if it goes up to 40, then it needs to stop doing its thing.
I think this is also something that PACT-CBOR profiles will limit heavily, because each of those steps is some stack frame-ish thing sitting around somewhere. So I could easily imagine that for things like Coral, the limit would more be like 3 or something in the range of 3 to 5, because anything that goes deeper than that, kind of you have to have a base URI and a context URI and all those things for each of the levels anyway. And any more than that is probably hard to handle.
Yeah, you actually can do tail recursion for the sharing, but not for the prefix or suffix compression.
Yeah, and tail recursion doesn't help you with Coral's nested depth. So as soon as you do tail recursion, you lose the ability to process a second element in that tree.
Okay, depends on how you do the tail recursion. I think we can take that offline, but
yes,
that was just a throwaway comment. Yeah, so the action item is to discuss those limits in the CBOR-PACT document. And that should allow us to use it more easily on the Coral side.
Yep. Okay. questions on Coral or the use of PAC-CBOR or PAC-CBOR in more general? Now that we have a bit more time and will otherwise end up a bit early. Any other business anyone would like to bring up? With that, I'd say thanks everyone for being here. I'd like to take the opportunity to remind you of the upcoming IETF cutoff, which, as I remember, without having the date off my head, will be before we next meet. And with that, see you in 2 weeks. Goodbye.
Bye, everybody. Thanks.
Actually,
Thank
doing
you.
it in 2
Bye-bye.
weeks, that would be in the middle of the hackathon, right? And a week before IETF.
Say again, please. Sorry, that got caught up.
Isn't 2 weeks the middle of the hackathon and IETF, a week before IETF?
That's 3 weeks.
3 weeks, okay.
So the cutoff is on the 12th, July 12th, and July 19th to 23rd is the hackathon.
So we have another meeting. Good, wonderful.
And of course, the IETF itself is on my birthday, as it has been for 20 out of 21 years now.
Specifically to honor you, Karsten.
Thank you. So I celebrated my 40th birthday in Kyoto and my 50th birthday in Vancouver, and looking forward to my 60th.
I'm looking backward to mine, so see you all in 2 weeks.
See you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.